So, let's go. Number 1, the fireflies. You are the first American ever to see the sun come up from orbit. And something is wrong with the light. It is February 1962. You are John Glenn, folded into a capsule barely bigger than your body, moving faster than any American has ever moved. The night side of Earth is falling away beneath you. Then the sun cracks over the curve of the planet, and the black outside your window fills with thousands of tiny glowing specks. They drift. They tumble. They hang in the dark on every side of you, yellow-green, soft, blinking in and out as they turn. You will later say they looked like fireflies on a real dark night. But you are 200 kilometers above the ground, in a vacuum, alone, and fireflies do not live here. So you do the thing a test pilot does. You reach for an explanation you can control. Maybe it is the little steam jets that keep you steady, you think. Maybe the vapor is freezing into ice out here, and the sunrise is lighting it up. You fire the jets to make more of them appear. Nothing happens. The swarm keeps drifting on its own, indifferent to you, like it was always going to be there whether you understood it or not. And here is the part that matters. On the radio, you keep it short. You describe them, and then you move on. Because you are a pilot on the first orbital flight of your entire country, and the last thing you are going to do is spend your air-to-ground time insisting you are surrounded by glowing things nobody can see but you. Who is going to believe it? You barely believe it, and you are looking right at them. It takes another astronaut to solve it. 3 months later, Scott Carpenter goes up, sees the same swarm, and does something Glenn did not think to do. He wraps his knuckles on the inside of the hatch. And the wall of his spacecraft sheds a fresh cloud of them, right on cue. That is the answer. The fireflies are ice. Tiny flakes of frozen moisture venting and flaking off the skin of the spacecraft, catching the low angle of the rising sun and throwing it back at the window. They are not visitors. They are not alive. They are you. Your own machine, quietly disintegrating one frozen crystal at a time and glowing while it does it. Sit with how strange that is for a second. The first eerie thing a human being ever saw in orbit was not aliens and not a signal. It was the spacecraft shedding pieces of itself into the dark, and a man being gently told to keep the poetry to a minimum on the open channel. That is the rule for everything that follows. These are all real. Every one of them happened to real people with real names on real dates. Some of them have answers as clean as Glenn's fireflies. Some of them still don't. And a few of them are things the people who saw them were told in one way or another, not to say too loudly. The next one is one of those. Number 2. The object that shadowed Gemini 4. 3 years later, another man is looking out another tiny window, and this one does not get an answer. It is June 1965. You are Jim McDivitt, commander of Gemini 4, orbiting somewhere over Hawaii while your crewmate sleeps. And there is something out there with you. You describe it later in the plainest words a fighter pilot can find. A cylinder, white, with a long arm sticking out of one side. Like a beer can, you say, with a pencil stuck out of it at an angle. It is roughly 3 times as long as it is wide, and it is just there, in space, keeping you company in a place where nothing is supposed to be keeping you company. You grab a camera, you get maybe 30 seconds, your window is smeared, the film is uncertain, and the thing does what these things always seem to do. It leaves before you can prove it was ever there. Now, you are a serious person. You know space is filling up with junk. Spent rocket stages, dead satellites, flakes of paint moving at bullet speed. You are not a man who wants to see a flying saucer, and you never once say the word. You just say you saw a thing, it had a shape, and you could not identify it. Years later, the government's big official study of these sightings, the one meant to shut the whole subject down, looks at your case. And even that study, the skeptical one, lists Gemini 4 as one of a small handful of astronaut sightings it cannot adequately explain. Read that again. The report designed to explain these things away could not explain yours away. Then it gets almost funny. A famous debunker gets handed a photograph by a defense officer. This, he is told, is what McDivitt really saw. It is a picture of the second stage of the Titan rocket that launched you. Case closed. Except when they show you the photo, you look at it and go, yes, I can clearly see that. That is the Titan's second stage. I know exactly what that is, and that is not the object I saw. So you are left with the worst kind of encounter, not a light in the sky you can wave away. A specific object, a definite shape, seen by a trained observer whose entire job is identifying aircraft who looked right at the solution and said, no, that is something else. And then you went back to work because you were in a 2-man tin can halfway through a mission and there was nothing else to do. The fireflies turned out to be ice. This one is still just sitting there in the record, unsolved, wearing a shape nobody can account for. And the next crew won't even get something to look at. They'll only get a sound. Number 3, the music behind the moon. You are farther from home than almost anyone has ever been on the one part of the trip where nobody on Earth can hear you scream and there is music in your headset. It is May 1969. Apollo 10. A dress rehearsal for the landing that will come 2 months later. You and one other man are in the command module, swinging around the far side of the moon. And the far side is not just far. It is a wall. The whole body of the moon is between you and Earth, which means radio contact is gone. No mission control. No voices. Nobody. For about an hour, you are as cut off as a human being can be and still be alive. That is when the whistling starts. It comes through the headsets, this thin, warbling outer space kind of sound, rising and falling. You look at each other. One of you says it out loud on the tape that history will keep. That sounds like, outer space type music. And then the line that says everything about being an astronaut in this exact moment. Who is going to believe it? Nobody will believe it. You are grown men, the best pilots your species has produced, floating in the dead radio shadow of another world, and you are quietly asking each other whether you should even mention the haunted house noise coming out of the wall. Here is where it gets good, because this is the story that teaches you what the word forbidden actually means for the rest of this list. That tape does not come out for decades. When the transcript finally goes public, it has a stamp on it, declassify in 1982, and the internet lights up because that sounds exactly like a cover-up. Secret music behind the moon, hidden for a generation, except it wasn't. Not really. NASA had a full transcript printed back in 1973. The audio was never truly locked away. It just sat in an archive, in a building, in an era before you could put a sound file online. So for practical purposes, it may as well have been buried on the moon itself. It only felt like a secret because getting it to you was almost impossible. And the sound? On the tape, one of the astronauts calls it in real time. It is probably the VHF radios, he says. 2 spacecraft, the command module and the lander, are close together and their radios are interfering, and that interference is whistling in your ears. A boring answer. A completely human, electrical, unmysterious answer arrived at by the man hearing it, in the moment, with no time to be spooked. So hold on to that, because it complicates the whole video. Sometimes the thing that got hidden for decades wasn't hidden on purpose, and the terrifying sound had a cause you could diagram on a napkin. The far side of the moon was not haunted. It was just quiet enough, and strange enough, that 2 of the bravest people alive weren't sure they should admit what they heard. The next thing on this list they couldn't have hidden if they wanted to. It was happening inside their own eyes. Number 4. The light flashes inside their skulls. You close your eyes to sleep and the universe puts on a show against the inside of your eyelids, one silent spark at a time. Every crew that left Earth's neighborhood started noticing it. You are drifting toward the moon, lights out, trying to rest. And in the total dark behind your closed eyes, a flash, a pinpoint, a thin streak of white, like a scratch of light drawn across nothing. Then another. Not often. Maybe 1 or 2 a minute. Enough that you cannot ignore them. Enough that you start to wonder what is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Something is passing through you. Out here, past the shield of Earth's magnetic field, the galaxy is full of cosmic rays. Atomic nuclei stripped bare and flung across space by exploding stars, moving at almost the speed of light. On the ground, the atmosphere and the planet's magnetism soak most of them up before they ever reach you. Out here, there is nothing to stop them. And every so often, One of them punches straight through the wall of the spacecraft, straight through your skull, and straight through your eyeball, and on its way through it lights up your retina like a struck match. That flash you see with your eyes shut is a single particle from a dying star, hitting the back of your eye and your brain doing the only thing it knows how to do with a signal from the retina. Calling it light. They did not just wonder about this. On the last 2 moon flights, they strapped a special helmet onto an astronaut, a bulky thing like an oversized fencing mask, packed on each side with sheets of film so sensitive they can record the track of one charged particle. The deal was simple. When you see a flash, you say so. And later, they checked the film to see if a particle went through at that instant on that path. It worked. The tracks and the flashes line up. 2 of them matched cleanly, and the geometry did the rest. Proof, written on film, that the light show was real, and it was made of radiation. And now the part nobody puts on the recruitment poster. This is not a fun quirk. It is a warning. Those same particles are tearing through the rest of you too. The soft tissue, the brain, the cells. On a quick trip to the moon, you take the hit and come home. On a trip to Mars, months each way, the flashes never stop. And neither does the damage behind them. Every spark is a reminder that space is not empty and it is not safe. It is quietly, constantly shooting through you. You can shut your eyes to the dark. You cannot shut them to that. Which brings up the sense they really weren't ready for. Not sight. Smell. Number 5. The smell of space. Space is a vacuum. There is nothing out there to breathe, nothing to carry a scent, nothing to smell. So explain why every person who has worked outside comes back inside smelling like a crime scene. Here is the scene. You have spent hours on a spacewalk, out in the hard vacuum, wrestling with equipment while the whole planet turns underneath you. Finally, you climb back into the airlock. The hatch seals. Air hisses back in around you. You crack your helmet. And it hits you. Burnt. Metallic. Like gunpowder just after the trigger. Like a steak seared hard in a pan. Like the sharp bite of a welding torch or the air right after a lightning strike. One astronaut said seared steak, another said hot metal, another said gunpowder. They walked in the airlock from different missions, different years, different countries, and they all reached for the same handful of words. Something out there is burnt, and it followed you home on your suit. But it can't be space itself because space has nothing to smell. So what is it? And this is where it gets a little unsettling, because the answer is that you drag the outside in with you. Out in low orbit, there's a thin haze of atomic oxygen, single oxygen atoms, hungry and reactive, and when they hit the surfaces of your suit, they help cook up ozone, that sharp electric tang. And drifting through the galaxy is an endless smoke of ancient carbon compounds, the burnt leftovers of dead stars and dead comets, and they settle onto your suit like soot. When scientists actually sampled the air from an airlock after a walk, they found the chemistry of cooked meat. The literal molecules that make a steak smell like a steak. So the smell is real. It is just not coming from the void. It is coming from the outside of your spacesuit, off-gassing into the first breath of air it has touched in hours. The scent of out there is the scent of something scorched. NASA took this seriously enough that they had someone recreate it, bottled it, sold it even, so that trainees could learn the smell before they ever met it, so that nobody's first breath back inside would be a surprise. Think about that. There is a perfume that smells like the edge of the survivable world, and it smells like a struck match and burnt dinner. You went up there expecting the great silence, the great cold, the great dark. Nobody warned you it would smell like something died in a fire. And the deeper you go into this list, the closer these encounters get to the body, and then past the body, into the mind. Because the next crew did not smell anything strange. They say they saw something looking back. Number 6. The Salute 7 Angels. On the other side of the space race, the story goes, a crew looked out the window and found the window full of faces. It is 1984, not an American mission. A Soviet one aboard the station Salyut 7, and the 3 men inside have been up there 155 days. That number matters. 5 months in a metal box, breathing recycled air, seeing the same walls, the same faces, the same sunrise 16 times a day until it stops meaning morning. Nobody has ever been fully honest about what that does to a mind. And then, the story says, the station floods with light. A warm orange glow so bright it blinds them, coming from outside. They press to the portholes, and out in that light, according to the tale, are figures. Enormous. The size of an airliner. Faces. Some versions say 7 of them. Smiling. Just there, alongside the station, in the vacuum, watching the crew watch them. And later, when a second crew arrives, they say it happens again. Now I have to be straight with you, because that is the deal on this channel. This one is the shakiest thing on the list. And you should know exactly why. A huge amount of the 7 Angels version can be traced back to a tabloid, the kind that ran alien babies on the front page. And one of the cosmonauts later flatly denied seeing anything unusual at all. So, if you came here to be told that 6 Soviets confirmed angels in orbit, I am not going to sell you that, because it isn't clean. But throw the angels out and something real is still standing there, and it is honestly stranger than the ghost story. Because we know for a fact what happens to human beings after months in that environment. Fatigue stacks up. Carbon dioxide creeps up in a sealed cabin and fogs the mind. Isolation and monotony sand down the brain's grip on what is real. Under exactly those conditions, people see things. And when a crew shares the same exhaustion, the same air, the same expectation, they can share the shape of what they see too. So the encounter here might not be out the window at all. It might be the first proof on this list that the most dangerous thing in space is not a rock or a ray or a rival satellite. It is what 5 months of nothing does to the animal doing the looking. The Soviets said little, the tabloids said too much, and the truth is quieter and worse. Up there, long enough, your own mind can become the thing you encounter. Hold that thought, because the next crew saw something too. And unlike the Soviets, we know they decided, on purpose, to keep their mouths shut. Number 7. Aldrin's Shadow. The most famous crew in history saw something following them to the moon and chose to say nothing because they were afraid of what the truth might cost them. This is Apollo 11, the mission, the one everybody knows. And about a day out from Earth on the way to make history, the 3 men aboard noticed something out the window. An object. Sizable, one of them will call it. Keeping pace with them, out in the black, catching the light. There are also, they report, unexplained flashes inside the cabin. And on the way home, a bright light they can't place. Bright enough that they half joke it could be some kind of laser. Now here's the human moment, and it is the hinge of this entire video, so slow down for it. Buzz Aldrin talked about this for years. And the reason the crew did not get on the radio and announce a mystery object trailing them to the moon was not that anyone ordered them to be silent. It was simpler and more human than that. If you are the crew of Apollo 11 and you call down to Houston that there is an unidentified thing pacing you through deep space, you know exactly what might happen. Doctors start asking questions. Flight surgeons start wondering if the crew is cracking. And in the worst case, someone decides that maybe you are not the right people to land on the moon after all. So they waited, and they decided the mission was bigger than the mystery. They kept it off the loop. Stop and feel what just happened to this list. Up to now, forbidden to discuss has meant something outside them. A tabloid burying a story, a transcript stuck in an archive, a Defense Department stamping a file. But right here, aboard the most watched spacecraft ever flown, the silence is coming from inside the capsule. Nobody forbade them. They forbade themselves. The rule they were obeying was the one every human knows in their gut. If you say the strange thing out loud, people will decide something is wrong with you. So you swallow it and you keep flying. And to Aldrin's credit, he never dressed it up. He has said plainly it was not aliens. The crew's own best guess is almost boringly reasonable. When the lunar lander was pulled out of its housing, 4 long panels were jettisoned and went tumbling off into space on roughly the same path. One of them, turning in the sun, glinting a mile or two off, would look exactly like a sizable object shadowing you to the moon. Probably a panel. But probably a panel came years later in daylight on the ground. In the moment, a day from Earth, there was just a thing out there they could not name, and a choice about whether to admit it. And the most capable people in the world chose silence, because they understood something the rest of this list keeps circling. The encounter is dangerous, but saying it out loud can be more dangerous still. The next man understood that too. So, he didn't ask permission at all. Number 8. Apollo 14's secret ESP experiment. One astronaut decided to run his own experiment on the way to the moon, and he didn't tell Mission Control because he already knew they'd say no. His name is Edgar Mitchell, and it is 1971, Apollo 14. Somewhere in that flight, on his own time, at the end of the day when he is supposed to be sleeping, Mitchell quietly starts trying to send his thoughts across space. He has a plan worked out before launch, a deck of cards, 5 simple symbols, a circle, a cross, wavy lines, a square, a star. Back on Earth, 4 people know to be ready at certain times. At those times, Mitchell pulls up a list of random numbers, and for each one, he stares at the matching symbol and concentrates 15 seconds a symbol, trying to push the shape out of his head, out through the hull, across the void, and into the mind of a person 250,000 miles away. The whole run takes about 6 minutes. He does it twice on the way out and twice on the way back. And NASA has no idea this is not on the flight plan. Nobody approved a telepathy test on a lunar mission. This is a man on the most expensive vehicle ever built carrying out a private parapsychology experiment in the gaps of the schedule, betting his own quiet minutes that the mind can reach farther than the radio. When he gets home, the results go to serious people in that field. And Mitchell claims that with 2 of his 4 receivers, the guesses came in above what chance should allow. He counts it, roughly, as a partial success. I'm not going to oversell that because you deserve the real version. The scientific verdict on this is not kind. The mission's timing slipped, which threw off the careful schedule the whole thing depended on. The result has never been cleanly repeated. Most people who study this land on the same place. It didn't prove anything. But that was never really the point of putting it on this list. The point is what it does to the shape of the story. Because look where the secrecy is coming from now. Not a tabloid, not an archive, not the Pentagon. The astronaut himself. The man in the capsule is the one running the hidden operation, keeping his own private encounter off the record, doing something up there that the people who sent him would never have allowed. Secret isn't being kept from the crew anymore. The secret is the crew. And Mitchell came back changed, by the way. Not by the cards. By the window. But we'll get to that. First, there are the missions where the silence wasn't a personal choice at all. It was the law. Number 9, the missions they still can't talk about. Some crews launched into a deliberate silence, carried something into orbit they were legally forbidden to name, and to this day nobody will tell you what it was. Picture the countdown, and picture it wrong. Because for this one, there is no countdown for you to hear. It is January 1985. The shuttle Discovery is on the pad, fully loaded, crew strapped in, and for the first time ever, NASA goes dark. No public commentary, no cheerful voice counting down the minutes. The launch time itself is kept secret until 9 minutes before liftoff, because the people who own this mission do not want anyone on the ground timing it. This is the first shuttle flight flown entirely for the Department of Defense, and the whole thing is a black box. 5 people ride it up. Among them, a man named Ellison Onizuka. What they do up there, officially, is nothing you are allowed to know. They deploy a payload. What payload? Classified. The best guess, pieced together by outside experts, is a giant eavesdropping satellite, a listening post boosted all the way up to a stationary perch 22,000 miles high, where it can hang over one spot on Earth and quietly drink in the planet's radio traffic. But that is a guess. No pictures of the payload were ever released. No images of the cargo bay. The crew came home and said nothing, because saying something was not an option. It was a crime. And here is the detail that will stay with you. These were not the Fireflies. There was no honest answer waiting to be found in an archive, no boring cause you could diagram once someone finally let you look. This silence was designed. It was built on purpose, and it holds to this day. Ellis and Onizuka flew that secret mission, kept the secret, and 1 year later climbed aboard another shuttle Challenger and never came home. The mission he could not talk about outlived him. Whatever he carried into orbit, whatever he saw in that cargo bay, went with him, and the file is still closed. So of everything on this list, this is the one where forbidden to discuss is the literal, unbroken truth. Not ice, not radio noise, not a tabloid, not a private choice. A real ongoing, enforced silence. Sitting in orbit right now, humming to itself, listening to all of us, while the few people who knew the whole story kept it, some of them, all the way to the grave. Which leaves the last encounter. And it is the one they were most quietly discouraged from ever putting into words. Not because it was secret, because it was too much. Number 10. The presence. The last thing on this list is not out the window. It has been sitting beside them the whole time, and almost nobody was supposed to say so. There is a phenomenon with a strange plain name. The third man. It shows up in the diaries of the people who go where humans are not meant to survive. Mountaineers near the summit, out of oxygen, out of hope. Sailors alone on the ocean for months. Shipwreck survivors. Polar explorers dragging themselves across the ice. And over in those exact moments, they report the same impossible thing. Someone is with them, unseen, calm, walking just beside them or just behind, radiating a quiet reassurance, sometimes even speaking, telling them to keep going. Shackleton felt it in the Antarctic and could not shake the certainty that his party was one member larger than it was, and it followed us up. An astronaut on the Mir station, alone with the hum of the machinery and the enormity outside, felt it too. That same presence. That same companion who is not there. Nobody can fully explain it. The best idea we have is almost tender, that deep in the brain, buried under all the newer wiring, there is an old survival trick. When a human being is pushed to the absolute edge, isolated and terrified and running out of everything, the mind can conjure a companion to get you through it. A guide. A witness. Someone to keep you from lying down in the snow. Your own head, building you a friend, because the alternative is facing the end alone. But there is a second thing up there, and it is the thing they were really discouraged from talking about. Not a hallucinated companion. A feeling. Astronauts look back at the whole Earth, the entire world, and everyone who has ever lived hanging in a window the size of your hand, and something breaks open in them. There's a name for it now. The overview effect. Grown men, test pilots, engineers, people trained to be calm voices reading numbers, quietly coming apart with awe and grief and love for a planet they suddenly understand is small and fragile and alone. And on the radio you keep it technical. That was the culture. You do not clog the air-to-ground loop with your feelings about the meaning of existence. You report your status. You run your checklist. You keep the poetry to a minimum. The same lesson John Glenn learned about the fireflies on the very first flight, all the way back at the start of this list. See the impossible thing. Feel the impossible thing. Then say as little about it as you can. That is the real secret the astronauts were forbidden to discuss. Not a cylinder. Not the music. Not a payload in a sealed bay. It was what all of it did to them on the inside. The awe they were not supposed to broadcast. The presence they weren't sure they were allowed to feel. The moment the loneliest human beings who ever lived looked into the dark, felt something look back, and understood that the strangest thing in space was the person floating there, doing the looking. The void never spoke. It didn't have to. It just held up a mirror, 250,000 miles wide, and waited to see who could bear to say what they saw in it.